Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, a warm welcome to everyone from the Positive Psychology branch of the Hellenic Psychological Society. We are very pleased to have with us Professor Marilyn Fitzpatrick, who is going to talk to us about caring, values, and about compassion, and how these can make our personal lives better and richer, but also they can make the world better. Now, Professor Anastasios Tasos will present Marilyn because they have a special relationship. So I will leave that to Tasos. But before that, just I want to announce that the Positive Psychology branch has a brand new website. And we're very proud of it. And we invite you to visit our website, and you will see us, who we are, and what we are doing, our publications, some books that we have, and also all the events that we are going to do. We are going to do other talks in the following months. So, just, yes, I leave that to you, Tassos, and welcome, Marilyn, and welcome everyone,
Marilyn.
And thank you for being here.
Καλησπέρα σε όλους και σε όλους, παιδιά. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που είστε σήμερα εδώ μαζί σας. I will try to do this bilingual. I will do it the way you do it in Canada, where when the Prime Minister speaks, he says a sentence in English and a sentence in French. So you have to be bilingual to understand him. And if you're only Anglophone or Francophone, you only get half of what the Prime Minister says. So I'll try to do.
Which is usually plenty.
Say it again.
Which is usually plenty.
Which is usually plenty. That's enough. That's true. Καλησπέρα λοιπόν σε όλους και σε όλους. Ευχαριστώ πολύ που είστε σήμερα εδώ μαζί μας. Είμαστε πολύ χαρούμενοι σαν κλάδος θετικής ψυχολογίας που έχουμε αυτήν την εποχιακή, αν θα θέλετε, ομιλία με την Marilyn Fitzpatrick. Την Marilyn Fitzpatrick που είναι γνωστή, είναι φίλη του division, αν θέλετε, του κλάδου μας κτλ. Και γιατί ασχολείται με τη θετική ψυχολογία, αλλά θα είναι και η επίσημη προσκεκλημένη στο επόμενο συνέδριο του κλάδου θετικής ψυχολογίας που θα γίνει σε συνδυασμό με τη συμβουλευτική ψυχολογία, σε μια ημερομηνία που ακόμη δεν ξέρουμε, γιατί μόλις σταθεροποιήθηκε του πότε θα γίνει το συνέδριο της ΕΛΨΕ. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. We're very excited to be here. I want to thank you especially Marilyn Fitzpatrick. Marilyn is a good friend, is a colleague, and somebody that we've worked closely together for the last, 20 years or so. But, at McGill University, while we're both at McGill together. We started working together in psychotherapy process research in counseling psychology, asking questions about how does psychotherapy work and what are the therapeutic ingredients of psychotherapy, with special attention to therapeutic alliance, to the relationship between the therapist and the client. And Marilyn developed ever since into becoming a prominent researcher in North America and shifting her focus into the values and the idea of how can values change people, or how can we use values. Of course, she will tell you more than she will tell you in a better way than I do, how we can use values or live a value-laden life, or a life that is guided by values, and how this promotes well-being, etc., etc. She is a professor emerita from McGill University, and she's one of these rare persons that she combines both the kind of the teaching, theoretical knowledge and knowledge base, including like being a very well-known researcher, identified by the Society for Psychotherapy Research, and she was also president of several, I think, conferences that she organized in Montreal for the North American chapter of the Psychotherapy Society. Society. And she is also a clinician. She's still a clinician, a therapist. And she's a rare combination that what she's teaching about, she's also researching it. And while she's researching it, she's also applying it with her clients. I'm looking forward to this talk today. Marilyn, thank you very much for being with us. It's a very interesting talk that we're going to talk about, I think, caring and caring values. I could say much more about you, but I think I will be quiet now and let you talk. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ όλους σας που είστε σήμερα μαζί μας εδώ και που μας βοηθάτε με τις δραστηριότητές μας. Καλή μας διάλεξη. Για αν δεν θα μπορέσουμε να μιλήσουμε μετά, να σας δώσουμε και τις ευχές μας για καλά Χριστούγεννα και καλή χρονιά. Marilyn, we're all yours.
Thank you. So my title is Caring is Not Just for Christmas. And the music that you heard playing in the background just a few minutes ago has this lyric. Christmas is sharing, Christmas is holly, Christmas is caring. And indeed, Christmas, when we think about Christmas, we think about it from the perspective of the things we care about. We get together with the people we love. We give gifts. Sometimes we give food or money away to charities. It's really a season about giving and showing our caring for others. And the point I hope to make to you today is that it's not just Christmas that's for caring, that indeed this is something that if we're going to have richer lives, we integrate more fully throughout the year. So sometimes I get a bit carried away. I get passionate about my subject. And so I've put this slide up here to remind myself to say this to you. And so that you can know that if you remember only 2 things from today, I hope you remember that living your caring values is good for you. I'll make that case with research and with your own experience, and that it's also good for the world. And the second thing I hope that you will remember is that you can change this. You can make a difference. This is not a given. This is not, I have the values I have and so be it, and that's the end of it. You can make a difference and stimulate caring in yourself. So if I get carried away and I forget to say the things I mean to say, please try to remember these 2 things. The questions that I'll address with you today are really 4 questions. First of all, what are caring values? This is the researcher in me. We have to define things so when we know what we're talking about and so we're clear. Why are caring values important? The research that says that that is so. And also, I hope some experiences you'll have today that prove it to yourself, because as we all know, research is great, but we believe our own experience much more. So I hope you'll participate with me in these experiences. I also want to talk about how caring values can be strengthened in your everyday life and how important it is to do that regularly in little bits at a time. And finally, how you can make caring values central to your life. I'll talk about an initiative that I'm involved in where we talk to people who have done just that. So first of all, I said I'd define things for you. What are values? Values are principles. So they're kind of abstract. They're not exactly rules, but ideas that are freely chosen. So if I do something to be kind in order to impress you, that's not freely chosen. It's not for myself. Values are things that are ours, that we choose freely. Sometimes that's called intrinsic in the literature. They're also deeply felt. They're emotional. When people talk about their values, they often get emotional about them. I've done interviews with people where their eyes teared up as they talk about their values. These are research interviews. Values also motivate action. So if I don't act on a value, then it's just nice words. And the values that I hold most strongly are the values that I act on most frequently and most deeply. And finally, values give meaning to our lives. So this definition is, by the way, one that I've kind of put together from different definitions in the research literature. And this idea of meaning and purpose in our lives, when we live our values, we have lives that feel more meaningful and more purposeful to us. Just a couple of words about what values are not. So typically, if I'm talking to people about values and I ask them, what kind of values do you have? What are your values? The first answer I get is my family. The way I'm going to talk to you about values today, that's not a value. Your family is not a principle. Your family is not something that you take action on. They just exist. Now, you may do things for your family. You may be helpful. You may hope to be wise with your children. You may act from love. Helpfulness, love, wisdom, these are our values. The family or your career or your pet are not actually values in the way I'm going to be talking about them today. This is not to say that those things aren't important to you. They are, but they're not the way I'm talking about values. So here I want to talk to you about what are caring values in particular, because not all values are caring values. And here you see in the photographs, there are two different boxes. And what I'm going to say to you is these are two different kinds of values that are diametrically opposed to one another. So in the top box, the one that says money, success, fame, and glamour, these are what we call extrinsic values. So they're self-focused, they're focused on me, and they relate to how others see us as powerful, as successful, as wealthy, as attractive. Those values in literature are referred to as extrinsic values. And I'll talk more about this as we go along, but just a little heads up, living according to those values doesn't make you very happy. It may make you wealthy, you may be very beautiful, but it doesn't make you happy. We also have what are called intrinsic values. Those values are other focused, and they relate to things we give to other people. So here are some examples of intrinsic values, and they're in two different categories: friendship, forgiveness, honesty, helpfulness, love. These are examples of intrinsic values in a category we call benevolence. And equality, broad-mindedness, social justice, peace, and unity with nature are self-transcendent values. All of these are intrinsic, okay? None of them are extrinsic values. They're all intrinsic, but they're in two slightly different categories, which I will talk to you about now. But first, I'm going to ask you to do something with me. As I said to you before, the research tells us that we believe our experiences much more than we believe research. So I'm going to ask you to work with me here and do something that helps you to learn a little bit more about your own caring or compassionate values. And there's a few steps here. I'll give you a little bit of time on your own. You don't have to do this with anybody else, just on your own. The first thing I would like you to do is to think of someone with whom you're upset at the moment. Okay. If you're rating this on a scale of 1 to 10, you should be not hugely upset with them, but at least sort of a 5 or a 6. Someone you're not looking forward to seeing, someone who's done you wrong in some way. I did this with one of my trainees one day, and she said, I can't think of anybody. And I said, okay, lucky you. If that's the case, many of you, I think, are psychologists. You might think of a patient who you're not looking forward to seeing. We all open our agenda on certain days, and there's that list of people who we're going to see, and some of them are like, oh, good. Oh, so okay. So if it's not someone in your life, a friend or a relative, I hope you have somebody in your mind now that you can think of that you're a bit upset with. The second thing is, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate how upset you are when you think of having to see this person. And as I said to you before, if you rate them less than a 5 or 6, pick somebody else. So it's somebody who you're quite upset with, and give it a rating. Okay, now I would like you to pick a caring or a compassionate value, one of those intrinsic values: caring, wisdom, justice, peace, unity with nature. I'd like you to pick a caring value that represents really the best of you when you are simpaticos. Okay, the next step is I want you to imagine meeting this person that you're kind of upset with and having a conversation with them in which you embody the value that you just chose, in which you are, if you chose wisdom, in which you are wise, if you chose broad-mindedness, in which you are broad-minded, if you chose helpful, helpfulness, in which you are helpful. So you have a conversation with them in which you act according to your value. Now, one of the things that often happens when we're upset with people is we have an issue with them. I want you to imagine the conversation not to solve the issue, not to make the problem go away. I just want you to imagine yourself interacting with this person according to that value. And I'm going to give you half a minute or so to think about that. Okay. I'll ask you just to come back to being here with me. And I would ask you to reflect for yourself what that made you feel like, to act according to your caring value in a situation with a difficult person. I was going to do a show of virtual hands, and then I just realized that if I'm sharing and you have me as primary presenter, I won't see your hands. But even though we can't do the show of virtual hands, just reflect in yourself if this made you feel better in that situation or being with this person. Not that it necessarily solved the problem. Acting according to our values isn't like a panacea. It doesn't fix the whole world. But did it help you to feel better? And now, as you've done that and you have your own experience, let me just take a minute and start to share some research with you that bears on this question. And the research says generally that living by our values makes us more satisfied with our lives. It's associated with higher levels of well-being, with life satisfaction, with reduced distress. It's also associated with less depression, less anxiety. And in fact, that there are some particular values that living according to those values makes us better. And I mean, you wouldn't have to think very hard to think about which are the values I'm going to be talking about. They are, of course, the intrinsic or caring values. Living with our caring values makes us feel pretty good. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about a study done by Natasha Lekes and her colleagues. And just to tell you a little bit about what they did, because I think it was clever, they had two experimental groups. One, which was, let's call it the Intrinsic Values group, and we'll call the other one the Life Details group. And the Intrinsic Values group was shown a list of 13 intrinsic values, and they were asked to pick two that seemed important to them, any two they wanted, and they could rename them if they wanted. If they didn't like the names that were given to them, they could give them a name that suited them. And then they wrote for about 15 minutes, a little paragraph or two about why this value was important, what experiences they had in their life of living out this value, how the value was incorporated in their day-to-day life, and why it was a more important value than others. And then they were encouraged to continue to reflect on these two intrinsic values that they've chosen. The control group wrote about life details. I won't say too much about that. And then what happened is, over the next 4 weeks, the researchers kept sending emails once a week to these people. And what they asked them, they sent them an email. They had a little two quotes about intrinsic values. They had a reminder, these are the two values that you chose, and a reflective question. Think about this question and how these values relate to this question. Once a week, they got one email that asked them to do this simple thing. At the end of 4 weeks, they did a follow-up. They collected another set of measures. And what they found was that the people who had been in the intrinsic values group, who had done the things that I just described to you, they had, first of all, they felt better after writing their essay in the first place. But after 4 weeks, the depth with which they'd reflected on their intrinsic values predicted a couple of things. It predicted their identification with the intrinsic value, and it also predicted their well-being. So the people who did this reflection on intrinsic values felt better just by writing for 15 minutes and thinking about it and reading a quote once a week for 4 weeks. It's not much of an intervention as interventions go. And there were significant differences between them and the control group. And it's not just living your values. It's also connecting with the meaning of your life. What is my life about? And when I frame my life as being about caring, I experienced greater satisfaction, more enjoyment of my work, more positive emotions, hope, better physical health, lower stress, lower depression. So all of these things are benefits of connecting with meaning. The last one is the one where I'd like to describe the research to you a little bit, because it says when we connect with meaning, we actually live longer. So this was a cohort study. These were elderly people, nobody with dementia, everybody was of sound mind. And they followed over 1,200 people over a period of 5 years. And they took baseline measurements of the extent to which they experienced meaning in their life. So their sense of purpose, it was called for the purpose of this study. They controlled, well, let me just tell you what the result is first. The people who had high levels of meaning had 57% less chance of dying than the people who had low levels of meaning. That's quite substantial and quite significant. And it's not just the researchers got lucky. They controlled for things that were known to cause death: depression, disability, neurotic personality, chronic medical conditions. I mean, think of the elderly. They controlled for chronic medical conditions and also income, because income is lower income is associated with shorter life. A 57% chance of living longer by having purpose and meaning in their life. So finding a purpose, finding a meaning, and living according to it is very important. And of course, the case I'm making to you is that having an intrinsic or a caring purpose is good for you. So I hope I've made that point, that it's very good to have meaning, to have a caring purpose. The question I'd like to address with you now is, does it make a difference to anybody other than me? Because if I'm a caring person, I probably care about other people. And does my being caring make any difference to anybody else? And what I'm going to say to you is that engaging with caring values helps the people we care about. And again, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a study. This one was done by Veronica Huta, and it involves the two ideas, or the way she expressed those ideas, the words she used were eudaimonia, and permit me to murder it in Greek here, eudaimonia. Did I get it? Yes? Okay. And idoni. Hedonia, or so in English we use eudaimonia, we use to mean values that are caring, and hedonic values are values that are associated with pleasure and fun and seeking enjoyment in life. So those were the things they were measuring. They brought participants in and they asked them, to what degree do you typically approach the activities in your life in this way? And they gave them a bunch of words that were either pleasure-seeking words or that were eudaimonic words, intrinsic values. And they had them rate themselves. Then they asked them a very interesting question. They said, okay, would you give us the names of 2 people you know, friends or relatives, anybody who knows you reasonably well, and we're going to call them and we're going to ask them about you, which they did. They didn't tell either the participant or the friends what the other ones had said. So that was kept from the other person. But when they talked to the friends and relatives, they said, tell us about your friend. And what kind of intentions do you think they have as they approach their activities? And they gave them the same list of words they gave the participants. And then they asked them, how does your friend make you feel when you're with them? And they rated things like emotion, connectedness, vitality, meaning, elevation, the sense of being lifted up by the person. So how do you feel when you're with your friend? And what they found was that when participants saw their friends as having caring values, they felt better with them in all of these ways: vitality, positive emotions, connectedness, meaning. And they didn't feel better with people who identified strongly with having fun, which is a bit counterintuitive for me. You think, I want to hang out with somebody who's fun, right? Those people don't influence you in the same way, but connecting with someone who is caring does. So our caring values can help the people around us. And I would also make the case to you that they have a broader implication in the world. And in order to talk about this, I just want to mention large data sets and looking at words. In one case, the language of the US Congress over 10 years, and in another case, the literature over the 20th century. And they did analyses of the language in these studies, and they looked at for caring words. And what they found is that caring and values-based words are in decline over the 20th century. When people hear them, they respond to them, they like them, but they are in decline. So this is something we need to think about with what's happening here. Why are those values in decline? If they're so important, if they make us feel good, why are they in decline? I'm going to describe another study to you just a little bit. And that's because we systematically misunderstand the values of others. This is a study done by the Common Cause Foundation, who I think does very good work, by the way. And they asked people in Britain, this is a UK foundation, they asked people in Britain the extent to which they endorsed caring values. And 74% of people say they found compassionate over selfish value. They endorse compassionate over selfish values. In other words, most people, 3/4 of us, think compassionate values are important. Then they asked them another question. They asked them, how important do you think those values are to other Britons? And they said, the way they said it is the average Briton. And 77% of people said, they're not important to other people. They're important to me, but they're not important to other people. In other words, we systematically misunderstand the values of others. We think other people don't care when they really do. So this takes us to the question then, what can we do about this? Can we grow values? Can values become stronger? And I'm going to make the case, I hope, to you that yes, they can. And again, I'm going to try to do it with your own experience first. But before I do that, I need you to understand a little bit about the structure of values. This is from the work of Shalom Schwartz, very, very prominent values researcher. And he did the Schwartz Values Survey. I always have trouble saying that. And that's the survey that's the basis of the European Values Survey. At this point, that survey has been given to literally tens of thousands of people. When this article was written, which was a number of years ago, it was 80-odd thousand. So it's given every 2 years. So presumably this structure was validated across an enormous sample. And what this structure says is that caring values, he calls them self-transcendent values, they're the ones up here in green, are directly opposite from self-enhancement values. achievement, power. So these are our intrinsic values up here, and these are our extrinsic values down here. And the stronger the green ones are, the weaker the pink and purple ones are, and vice versa. The stronger the pink and purple ones are, the weaker the green ones are. Similarly, on this axis, the stronger the orange yellow are, the weaker the blue are, and vice versa. Okay? And that structure exists, this organization of values exists across cultures. There are cultural differences in values. Some cultures value some things more than others. And there's an interesting map of that, which we don't have time to get to today. But the structure is very important. It's important to the things that I'm going to be telling you about. It's important for you to understand that when you stimulate these values get weaker and vice versa. Okay, so now we'll just go to a little research that shows that. But first, as I said to you, we're going to do an experience. Whoops. Can I make this bigger? Yes, I can. Okay, so I want you to focus on the values in green. And I want you to pick one. One that you think is important. It may be one that you already act on a great deal in your life, or maybe not, but just pick one that you think is important. I hope I'm going to change the slide. So if you haven't decided, just pick any one you want. Do it quick. Okay. Now, I'm going to do something with you called priming. So this priming in English is what you do to a pump, one of these old-fashioned pumps. I had to look this up to figure out what priming actually was with respect to pumps, but I've done this as a kid. You pour the water in the top, you pour a little bit of water in the top, and you move the handle up and down, which actually expands. There's a leather piece inside that expands and that makes contact with the sides. And so you put in a little bit of water and you get a flow of water. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about putting in a little bit of effort and getting a flow. So I would like you to bring to mind that caring value, one of those values in green that you just had. And Agathi, this is where we're going to go into groups, but not just yet. Okay, let me explain first.
Okay.
Okay. So you're going to spend 10 minutes in your group. And for 5 minutes, you're going to be a speaker and the other person's going to be a listener. And then you're going to change roles and the other person's going to be the speaker and you'll be the listener. Okay. And what I would like you to talk about is an upcoming event. Maybe it's Christmas. Maybe it's a meeting you're going to attend tomorrow. It could be anything, coffee you're going to have with your friend at the end of the day, anything. But an upcoming event that you know that's coming up in your life in which you can use the green value that you just picked, okay? And you're going to talk about that to the other person. You're going to tell them what the value is, you're going to tell them what the event is, and you're going to explain the ways that you would use the value in this event. Okay, I say event, situation, I mean, it doesn't have to be a big thing, some little thing. As you're talking, just pay attention to how you feel. And then if you're the listener for the first 5 minutes, you can ask questions of the person who's talking. You can reflect what you see and think about what's happening as the speaker talks about this. And then at 5 minutes, they will send them a note and they'll switch roles and do the opposite. Okay, just before we go, because once you're in breakout rooms, you won't see the instruction. So just read them over, make sure you understand them. And if you have a question at this point, before we go to the breakout rooms, can you type it in the chat so that I can answer any questions you have? I'm not usually this clear. People usually have questions. Okay, So this is how you're going to prime your caring values. 5 minutes talking about an upcoming event and living your values, and 5 minutes listening to that. Gathy, can we go to the breakout rooms? If you have any problems getting into a breakout room, again, put something in the chat.
Yes, people are changing, making some final. Okay, I think they're ready. I'm opening the rooms. Just go to the room that you are assigned.